Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metropolis Radio. Today we are taking a look at the Netflix movie Extraction. Now, when this movie came out, nobody could shut the hell up about it. You couldn't go anywhere on the internet without somebody bringing this movie up like it was the second coming of Christ. Now, what we're going to explore is whether the hype surrounding this movie helped it or hurt it. Now, you've probably already read the title before clicking on this video, but hear me out and then form your own opinion. Now, before we get started, if you like the content that I produce, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the BitChute channel. It's a small click for you, but for a small channel like mine, it helps out a lot. Like, comment, and share the video around if you want to. Follow me on the blog and social medias. Links to those are in the description below. So with that out of the way, let's tear into Netflix's Extraction. Now, as always, we always start off by looking at the creative team behind the movie, and this movie was directed by Sam Hargrave. Now, this movie marks his feature-length directorial debut. Now, where he got started was he was a stunt coordinator. He was a stunt coordinator on Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame. He was also Chris Evans' stunt double for the Avengers and Captain America Winter Soldier. Now, don't count this guy out just based on where he started. Chad Stahelski, the director of the John Wick movie, started out the same way. I think he started off as a stunt coordinator, fight coordinator. It was one of the two. And who's going to know action a lot better? Is it going to be, some random director some random indie director that they hire because they're easier to control, or a former fight coordinator? I'll let you take your pick on that one. And this movie's screenplay was written by Joe Russo of the Russo brothers. Now, the only big writing credit on his resume that you might be familiar with is the movie Welcome to Collinwood with George Clooney, Sam Rockwell, and Isaiah Washington. And even that one you might not even be familiar with. Now, believe it or not, Extraction is actually based off of a graphic novel that was published in 2014. And this was a thing in Hollywood for years and years and years. If you wanted to get a movie made and off the ground, the best way to do it, if you were a writer, is get it published as a graphic novel, because it didn't matter if anybody had bought it. But that could be something that you could pitch. And I think it was Max Landis who said that. I think he was at a New York film school, not NYU, but there was another one where he admitted that was the norm for quite a few years. So getting back to it, this movie is based on a graphic novel called Ciudad, and that was written by Ande Parks along with the Russo brothers. It was published in 2014. Now, here's the original synopsis of the graphic novel. Quote, "She was kidnapped and taken to the worst place on earth. He was hired to get her out. Now, they're both trapped in a city that wants them both dead, and their hopes of getting out are fading fast. From the bloodthirsty criminals to the corrupt police to the kid hiding a Glock under his sweatshirt on the corner. Everyone wants Tyler Rake and Ava Roach dead." Now, according to an interview with CBR, this was being developed as a movie for at least 5 years before the graphic novel was published. And like I said, this was a common tactic for writers to get their movies made in Hollywood for quite a few years, but I already went over them. There's no sense in retreading over old ground. Now let's move on to the character analysis portion of this, and we're going to start off with Chris Hemsworth as Tyler Rake. He's the mercenary tasked with rescuing a drug dealer's son from another drug dealer in another country. And I am going to butcher the hell out of this name, but keep in mind, I'm not from India and I don't speak Hindi. So, Rude Rask Jaiswal, I'm going with that. Fuck it, that's his name now. As Ovi, the kid that gets kidnapped by the rival drug lord is basically all he is. Then you have Randeep Hooda as Saju. Now, he's also tasked with saving the drug lord's son, and we'll get into that in the narrative analysis portion in just a quick second. So he hires the mercenaries to do the heavy lifting, and then he would kill them to get Ovi back because he couldn't afford to hire the mercenaries to begin with. Oops, didn't have to wait for the narrative analysis portion. Whatever. I'm not editing this out anyway, so fuck it. Now let's get into the narrative analysis portion of this. Now, this movie being an action movie, typically it's more plot-driven than character-driven, and that's fine. So basically, the story is like Ovi, the son of the biggest drug lord in India, more specifically Mumbai, formerly known as Bombay, has been kidnapped by the biggest drug lord of Bangladesh, Now, Saju, having been ordered by Ovi's father from prison to go save him, decides to hire the mercenaries to go find him. And once the mercs find him, Saju plans to kill them so he basically doesn't have to pay them. It's actually a really good plan. The mercs find out and tell Tyler to basically get to the extraction point by himself and just leave the kid behind because, well, you have this guy that's basically hunting you down and killing you to get out of paying the money. It makes sense that given that they've not only been conned but are getting killed off, and now they're getting killed off from both sides of the conflict. The drug lord from Bangladesh wants him dead, and now Saju wants him dead, so go fucking figure. And there is a subplot revolving around David Harbour. His character owed Tyler a favor, and he tries to take Ovi back to the drug dealer from Bangladesh to cash in the $10 million bounty on his head. And I guess this was supposed to add character development to the movie by showing that Tyler isn't just a mercenary for hire. And honestly, I think it actually drags the movie down quite a bit. It also drags down the potential of the character. Someone like Tyler Rake, his appeal could be very much like what James Bond's appeal was for the last 40, 50 years, where he's only doing what he's doing because this is his job. This is how he puts food on the table. He doesn't give a damn what side of the conflict you're on. It's who's ever going to pay you the most amount of money. Now, Tyler does still decide to get Ovi out of Bangladesh and enlists the help of Saju, since the main mission is to now get Ovi out of Bangladesh and back to India. Ovi gets extracted with Saju getting killed by a sniper, and Tyler, quote-unquote, getting killed. And I say that because the ending is ambiguous enough where the filmmakers could bring Chris Hemsworth back for a sequel if they really, really wanted to. So I understand not killing him off because, you don't want to ruin it. You don't want to ruin a potential sequel before the first movie even comes out. But, I mean, you're going to have to pull some Deus Ex Machina shit to bring Tyler Rake back to life. Now, for the first time, at the time that I'm recording this, I'm actually going to discuss the changes from the original source material to the screen. And the first big change is obviously the setting. In the graphic novel, the story takes place in Ciudad del Este in Paraguay, hence the title Ciudad. The movie takes place in Dhaka, Bangladesh. Now, what's being speculated about the change was the tax breaks given that this movie was shot in Thailand, India, and Bangladesh. Now, other movies have done this in the past. On my channel, I actually covered the movie Dagon that came out in 2001 for Horathon. Now, the original source material for those movies, not the original source story Dagon, but Shadow over Innsmouth, which is what Dagon is more based upon, took place in a fishing village in Massachusetts in the short story. But in the movie, it's a small fish. It's a fishing village in Spain because it was a Spanish production, but it was still a fishing village. So whatever, the setting doesn't really alter much. And another big change is that instead of an 18-year-old boy that Tyler rescues, it's an 18-year-old girl, and that should have given the original synopsis should have given that away. And yeah, the girl's name is Ava Roach, and I'm gonna mispronounce that. My Spanish is a little rusty. I grew up in Colorado for 20 years, but I've been out of it for quite a few years, and I haven't had to use it, so whatever. Now, what this leads to is a natural romantic relationship being developed between the two, given the fact that she's 18 and he's her rescuer type thing. Okay, whatever. And also, Tyler did not have a young son in the graphic novel. The filmmakers added that in lieu of the fact that he was rescuing an 18-year-old boy in the movie versus an 18-year-old girl. And Tyler did, in fact, survive in the end of the graphic novel. He still falls in the river, but wakes up in a hospital bed in Argentina. Now, the original script for the movie had him die, to be fair, but that was changed after test screenings showed that half the audience liked his death and the other half did not, hence the ambiguous ending. And also, I think Netflix basically weighed in and said, well, let's not fuck our chances for a sequel if this really takes off. So, fine. I mean, I don't care that the ending was ambiguous. I know why they did it. And then finally, the last big change from the original source material to the screen is that Ava runs away and starts a new life in the graphic novel. She decides to escape Paraguay and reinvent herself as Natalia, and is last seen taking a sculpture class in Paris. Now, it was assumed that she did that with the money that Tyler gave her at the end of the graphic novel, And in the movie, Ovi does stay in Mumbai, but I think, he's more like hiding, more aware. But still, he's still in Mumbai. He can still be captured if he doesn't escape from, Mumbai, formerly known as Bombay. Now let's take a look at how this movie was received. Now remember, this movie was released to Netflix. Therefore, there is no reported budget or box office gross. Now this movie has a Rotten Tomato meter score of 66% based on 270 critic reviews, with the critics' consensus being, quote, spectacular stunt work and an electric performance from Chris Hemsworth can't save Extraction from being dragged down by its aimless violence, end quote. Whatever, it's an action movie. And this movie has an audience score of 69% based on 3,757 audience reviews. Now, this movie has a Metacritic score of 56% based on 35 critic reviews and a user score of 6.4 out of 10. A user score of 6.4 out of 10 based on 365 ratings. And this movie sits on IMDb at 6.7 out of 10 based on 147,583 reviews. Now, Netflix revealed in July of 2020 that the movie had been watched by 99 million households during its first 4 weeks of release. The movie released on Netflix on April 24th, 2020. And this is Netflix's most successful original movie that they've ever released in terms of viewership numbers. In May of 2020, Joe Russo was tapped to write the sequel for this movie. Well, herpa derp, if it's that successful, yeah, they're going to want to sequelize this shit to death. And I think that they could with Tyler Rake, as long as they maintain the fact that he's a mercenary for hire, that he's just doing this because it's his job. That could sustain him like James, Tyler Rake can be Netflix's James Bond for all we know, but that's going to really depend on how they handle the sequels going forward. Now, before I end this video, I feel I have to stress this. This is not a bad action movie. It's actually pretty good. Now, do I feel that this movie was overhyped to the fucking moon, though? Do I think that this is one of the best action movies ever fucking made? Hell no. There's a lot more that I consider better than this. Now, I heard a lot of people claiming that this movie would have done well in theaters had it been released under pre-COVID circumstances. Would it have, though? Well, let's look at another Russo brothers produced movie. That was 21 Bridges. 21 Bridges had almost the same marketing as this movie did. The Russo brothers are attached to it, and it's being led by an MCU actor. 21 Bridges had Chadwick Boseman leading, and Chadwick Boseman obviously played Black Panther. And Extraction is being led by Thor himself, Chris Hemsworth. Now, 21 Bridges was released to theaters, and it didn't even make its budget back. And that had a budget of, I think, $40 million. And yeah, it didn't even make that back. So this movie going straight to a streaming service made sense if you look at the situation. Because what's better? Run the risk of releasing it to theaters knowing that the first movie you didn't even make your budget back, or accept a buyout from a Netflix and Amazon and Apple TV where you make your budget back and you make a nice little profit on the side on top of that, and now you don't have to run the risk of it being a box office bomb. And to make it clear, like I said, I'm not saying that this is a bad movie. I just believe that the hype was way, way overblown for what this movie was. And honestly, too much hype can kill a movie. And I'll give a perfect example. Now, this is a gaming example, but I've been a gamer for 20 years. And that game was No Man's Sky, and that game is pretty infamous. That game had an incredible amount of hype before it released, and once it did, almost no one was impressed with the final product, basically calling Sean Murray a snake oil salesman at the time. Now, in my opinion, the game was actually really decent for what it was. It was a nice, calming, relaxing game. You can play it for an hour and calm yourself down. You don't really have to worry about anything. But like I said, too much hype killed that game's potential. And I believe the same thing happened to Extraction. And you are more than free to agree or disagree with me. Personally, I don't care. Form your own opinions. Don't just take mine or anyone else's as gospel.